Hello, my name is Jimena Perry. You already know me. I'm the project coordinator of the Explorers of the International Federation for Public History. Today we have with us a Dr. Noah Swisa. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. She is going to talk about her doctoral research, if I'm not wrong. Her presentation is called From 1952 to Today, Unpacking the German-Israeli Relationship. Dr. Noah Swisa holds a PhD in International Relations from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Her research focuses on special relations in international politics, with a particular emphasis on German-Israeli relations, history and memory, and the role of friendship in international affairs. Her doctoral dissertation examined the resilience of the German-Israeli special relationship, exploring the factors that have sustained it over time. Noah, thank you very much for accepting the Explorer's invitation, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Jimena. So hello to everyone. My name is Noah, and I am very grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to discuss this topic. It's probably my favorite subject to talk about. After all, I spent years researching it for my PhD, and I hope you'll find it as fascinating as I do. So first, I want to share how it all began, how I ended up with this topic. And my interest in Germany and the German-Israeli relationship started already in high school. So many years ago, when I participated in a youth exchange delegation. At that time, my perception of Germany was shaped almost entirely by the history of World War II and the Holocaust. This was years ago, so before social media and before there was easy access to online information. So my views were quite limited. I didn't necessarily have a positive impression of Germany at the time, but the opportunity to travel abroad for the first time in my life was very exciting. So I seized the opportunity. And it turned out to be an eye-opening experience because we traveled, explored, ate, drank. The legal drinking age in Germany is 16, and we were just turning 16. We talked, we partied, and we simply enjoyed ourselves. But we also learned, engaged in discussions, met with parliamentarians, and felt very important. I was struck by this. I was struck by Germany itself, by the way we, an Israeli delegation, were received, and by the openness with which quite difficult topics were discussed. Fast forward a few years, I started an MA in contemporary German studies at the Hebrew University, and my curiosity about German-Israeli relationship deepened. I decided to dedicate my research to it, which led me to pursue this PhD. And the central questions that fascinated me was, how did two countries with such a painful history become so close? So what make this relationship special? And as I began researching, I quickly realized that I was not the first one to ask these questions. Shocking, I know, because the German-Israeli relationship has been studied quite extensively. But while many scholars examined it, I found that no one had quite explained why this relationship remained so resilient and throughout so many changes in both countries, but also in the international environment. So before I continue, just a few clarifications. First is that this topic is vast. It's covering everything. Covering everything would take me a few days. So today, I will send you to just read my dissertation. Not really. I will just focus on one key example that illustrates the origins, evolution, and the endurance of these special ties. Second is that I say Germany. I keep saying Germany, and I'm referring either to reunify Germany or West Germany, depends on the time. This talk will not cover East German-Israeli relations. And third, the word special will come up a lot. So let's define it. What do I mean when I say special? This term, special relationship, is widely used in international relations. It was first used by Winston Churchill when he was describing the Anglo-American one. And it has since been applied to other bilateral ties. So when I talk about special relations, I refer to a unique form of bilateral relationship between two countries, one that is defined by deep cooperation across multiple fields, trust, reciprocity, and preferential treatment, and it has long-term resilience, even in the face of challenges. So just to clarify, in international relations, most theories will predict that countries will cooperate or be in a good relationship when they have a certain interest or when they have a mutual enemy or threat. Ties would usually be considered to be short lasting, and unless they are facilitated by an agreement or by an institution. But unlike ordinary bilateral ties, special relationships involve extensive cooperation. It is across multiple domains, and it, as I said, expected to be long-lasting, without any agreement or institution facilitating them. To put it simply, special partners are like best friends, the ones you invest in more, the ones you prioritize over others. And Germany and Israel fit this model perfectly. They are best friends. In the world of different relationships with countries, they have a special one. Their cooperation spans multiple fields. It involves numerous institutions and individuals, and it has remained strong despite major political and social shifts. So, why is the German-Israeli relationship so special? Most studies attribute the uniqueness of the ties to the historical context, and they are, of course, not wrong at all. The Holocaust and Germany's historical responsibility undoubtedly played a foundational role. But does history alone can explain why this relationship remains so extensive, resilient, and multidimensional even decades later? I argue that history alone does not suffice to explain it. Instead, I propose another perspective. Germany and Israel have complementary needs and capabilities. And this complementarity has been a major driver of their enduring partnership. Moreover, the common perception that Germany is a giver and Israel is a passive recipient is quite misleading. In reality, both countries benefit from this relationship and actively maximize their complementary strengths. Okay, so the first moment when we see complementarity is at the beginning, the early 1950s, when both Germany and Israel were newly established states. Yet their situation could not have been more different. West Germany was emerging as one of the two successors of the Third Reich. It needed rehabilitation and international acceptance. Israel was a young country struggling to absorb massive immigration, including many Holocaust survivors, surrounded by enemies and in desperate need of resources. Despite strong public opposition in both countries, Israel's leadership saw the potential benefit of engagement with Germany. Both countries had simultaneous and complementary needs, which led them to negotiate the reparation agreement of 1952. This was the first step towards their special relationship. It was a groundbreaking agreement because first, there was no legal obligation to such an agreement. West Germany and Israel did not exist at the time of the Nazi crimes. And second, the agreement was both symbolic and substantive. Germany took moral responsibility and also gave Israel reparations of $715 million in goods. Since then, cooperation, the ties have developed and evolved between the two countries in different spheres. And to make it more simple, I will focus on one case study, which is the scientific cooperation, which I found a great example of the complementarity between the countries and the way that they were utilized. So how did it start? After World War II, any form of collaboration between the countries seemed quite unthinkable, but even more so in science. And why so? Because the German scientific community had played quite an active role in the Nazi racial program and war crimes. And also in Israel, there were strong restrictions despite the reparation agreement against ties with Germany. There was actually a special committee that was enforcing those restrictions. And for example, Israeli students were banned from going to Germany to study. Yet, despite this difficult backdrop, scientific cooperation began, and it was driven by individual scientists, by visionary individuals who recognized potential and wanted to start cooperating. What were their motives? Academic interests, opportunities for young researchers, Also, the need for Germany to break a scientific isolation that it was experiencing in the first years after the war. And Israel, it needed research funding and global networks. One milestone was in 1959 when a delegation of Max Planck Institute, which is a research institute in Germany, visited Israel. It visited the Weizmann Institute in Rehovot, one of three leading universities in Israel that were already existed at the time. And the German delegation was very impressed. Otto Hahn, which was the president of the institute at that time, was so impressed that he recommended Chancellor Adenauer to allocate 3 million Deutsche Mark to fund scientific cooperation. Schmidt, one of the scientists, the Israeli ones who were involved, said that the German delegation left with the impression that the institute is a modern center of research existing in a highly developed country. They indicated that our equipment and manpower compared more than favorably with European centers and is perhaps rather appropriate to an American institute than to a German university. These individuals needed governmental support to initiate cooperation. And after they drafted their first memorandum of what kind of cooperation they imagined between Max Planck and Weizmann Institute, they needed to secure the funds and the support. And they managed. And why is that? Germany sought to establish positive ties with Israel to gain international legitimacy in general. The initial stages of cooperation received essential governmental backing, as it also aligned with the broader foreign policy objectives, both in Germany and in Israel. The financial resources that were allocated by Germany at first largely stemmed from Israel's special status at the time. They were a means of compensating Israel for the absence of diplomatic relations. So the reparation agreement was signed in 1952, and diplomatic relations were only established in 1965. And for most of the time, it was Germany that postponing them for its own reasons. Giving these funds were a way to compensate. On the Israeli side, it aimed to bolster its scientific community by securing the necessary financial support and international connections. Eventually, between 1960 and 1965, Germany provided 17 million Deutsche Mark in funding. Initially, this was, as explained, driven by historical responsibility. But after a while, this cooperation shifted from science as compensation to science for excellence, because it showed a great success. And why did it work? Why it was so successful? So Israeli sociologist Gad Yair conducted an extensive research study, a super interesting one, that inquired the scientific cultures in both countries. And he showed that there are different approaches within German and Israeli scientific cultures. In Germany, there was a hierarchical framework that resulted in the pursuit of incremental, conventional scientific endeavors. And in Israel, the model champions innovation and boundary trespassing. You can say that in Israel, the Israeli chutzpah was very helpful to advance things, and in Germany, you had the advantage of being organized. German and Israeli scientists could harness their differences in a mutually complementary manner. During their short, one example is in the research from Deichmann, saying that during their short and long-term visits, young researchers from both countries encountered individuals with different knowledge and approaches in their field of research, some of which was complementary. Alongside the advantages stemming from differences, Germany and Israel found common ground that bolstered their cooperation. So first, a lot of Israeli scientists were of German, Austrian, and Central European origin. So they facilitated a common language, they had a common language, they had mutual understandings. Second, the contributions that were made by the Germans were used to buy crucial, costly pieces of infrastructure from Germany. So using similar equipment made it easier to cooperate. And one example is, since we, the German scientists, work with similar equipment or even identical instruments, as do the Weizmann Institute, exchange of scientists is relatively easy. Another advantage was that while in Germany, at that time, there were research restrictions, particularly in fields such as genetics and nuclear research, Israel had no such constraints. It allowed German scientists to pursue research objectives in Israel freely. And thanks to these advantages, cooperation strengthened over time, and it also expanded beyond natural sciences into multiple disciplines. It also had a very important outcome that it built trust and personal relationships, which help sustain bilateral ties even during political crises. A prime example is the support that German scientists extended to their Israeli colleagues during times of conflict. So, for example, during the 1967 war, when the German government declared neutrality, a group of German scientists sent a telegram to their Israeli colleagues at the Weizmann Institute, and they expressed solidarity and emphasized that they did not share their government's position of neutrality. This telegram illustrates the development of personal commitment, friendship, and shared professional interests. The success of collaboration fostered further collaboration. The success that was apparent in the scientific world also was also apparent in industry beyond the academic world. So Germany and Israel exhibit strikingly complementary strength in the realm of innovation. Germany's institutional framework is designed to foster companies that excel in optimization, producing highly refined world-class products. We all know that the stamp made in Germany is something that immediately remind us of great quality, great cars. However, the same structure often leads German firms to focus primarily on incremental innovation rather than groundbreaking, disruptive advances. In contrast, Israel thrives in precisely this area. Its ecosystem fosters radical, disruptive innovation with startups and entrepreneurs known for pushing technological boundaries. Yet, Israeli firms often struggle to translate their path-breaking ideas into scalable mass-market products. This creates a unique synergy. By collaborating and investing in each other's economies, German and Israeli firms can leverage their respective strength while mitigating their weaknesses. German companies benefit from Israel's bold, high-risk innovation culture, while Israeli startups gain access to Germany's expertise in scaling and industrial production, making their innovations commercially viable on a global scale. The head of the director of the German-Israeli Chamber of Commerce told me in an interview that they all come here. When he says they, he refers to German companies, big German companies, Mittelstand German companies. They all come here to Israel, and it is not because of the love of Zion, and it is not because of the special historical ties, but because of a growing compatibility and because of growing common interests and the complementarity that Israel and Germany can offer each other. When we look at this all together, the development of scientific ties show us that if we look at the German-Israeli relationship over the decades, we see two key forces at play. One is history, that Germany's commitment to acknowledging its past and supporting Israel. And the second is complementarity, mutual benefits that sustain and expand this relationship and that appear to be existing in different ways along the way. While history definitely laid the foundation, complementarity allowed the relationship to flourish across science, business, technology, and many more fields of cooperation. Without history, this bond might not have emerged, but without complementarity, it would not have endured. The historical background, it didn't only establish initial complementarity, but it also casted into interaction between the people a distinctive significance. So the historical context, it influenced Germany's efforts to safeguard its image, but it also manifests in its unwavering commitment to Israel's security, to initiatives against anti-Semitism, celebrations of successful cooperation, investments in commemoration and Holocaust education, and more. Furthermore, I found that interpersonal interactions played a crucial role in maintaining and enhancing commemoration and remembrance rituals. So interactions that are happening through mutual visits, conferences, seminars, joint projects, and more contribute to engagement with the past. and Holocaust memory, especially among younger generation, and it does so in a more organic way than learning about it from a book or a school. So when scientists or researchers visit Israel when they are here for a research stay, they would usually go visit Yad Vashem. They would engage themselves in ceremonies or in conversations that allow this commemoration to stay alive. Summing up, the German-Israeli partnership is not just a product of the past. It is a dynamic, evolving relationship that continues to be shaped by shared interests, collaboration, and recognition of each other's strengths.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Noah, for this presentation. I have to admit that I didn't know what to expect, maybe because of my ignorance. But I think this is a very important I think this presentation is very important because for people like me that we don't know much of the topic, you made clear certain points and also like debunked certain stereotypes that we might have. So I really, really enjoyed it. I have a question. Um, since I'm a historian and our audience, not mainly, but many of them are historians. You mentioned at some point at the beginning that that history was not enough. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So the historical context was really shaping the beginning of the relationship. It created the fact that Germany needed rehabilitation, that it needed to gain its place again in the world and to regain legitimacy, and Israel could give it. And this is something that initiated the context at the beginning, but I don't think it can explain the fact that cooperation, and if we focus still on the scientific realm, has advanced to so many fields. So today, scientific cooperation between Israel and Germany includes cooperation between the governments, the states of Germany, the Länder states of Germany, universities, research organizations, the political foundations in Germany. Basically, every organization that is relevant is involved in this relationship. And this has happened because this cooperation turned to be so successful, and because this cooperation created interpersonal relationships that maintained it, gave motivation to continue, fostered trust, foster understandings. And so I think that history helped to create it, and it continues to cast a lot of meaning into cooperation and a lot of meaning into the interaction between the individuals and the organizations. But I think it's really hard to say that only on the expense of the past or the historical responsibility that Germany assumed, we could explain the fact that cooperation is so vast and deep.
Okay. Okay, because that also makes me think about also what you mentioned about historical memory and all the commemorations that you were talking about. Could you perhaps give us an example about one commemoration of historical memory that you were talking about?
I meant that the interaction between people, between German and Israelis, creates a commemoration ritual that is that is happening in a more organic way. So
Okay.
when you have German visitors to Israel and they experience this firsthand, to be in a ceremony for Yom HaShoah, or they visit Yad Vashem with their Israeli colleagues, the experience is much more natural, if I can say that. And it helps to preserve the remembrance of the Holocaust in a way that is more personal and more close to heart.
Okay, 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 because in that sense, I would say that, I mean, history there is very present, right?
It's always present. It's always present, and I hope it will continue to be present, because I think this memory is something that has a lot of significance in making lessons from the past to the future. However, I think that I don't think that it's a bad thing that it doesn't facilitate the extensive cooperation. I don't say it in a bad way. I'm saying that, on the contrary, we should see a, it's a victory that Germany and Israel were able to build something so magnificent between them, despite the past, while respecting the past.
No, I mean, the presentation was about the relationship between Germany and Israel. That's perfectly fine. But are there other countries that have the same kind of special relation that you can think of? Or why did you, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, but why do you think this one is like more outstanding, let's say?
So I always say that there are other special relationships. The one between Israel and the U.S., for example, France and Germany. For a while, Israel and France were considered to share a special relationship until the 60s. But this one is considered, and I consider it to be a special relationship, because it doesn't only qualify to these cold definitions of extensive cooperation, resilience, preferential treatment, but it also special because of the past, because two countries with such a history could have built bridges to that extent. And I think that we can learn from that a lot about reconciliation processes, and the fact that two people, even after a very dire conflict, can build something new and productive.
Yes, I totally agree. I thought that also that was very important about your presentation. Like, despite painful events, there's still a way to build a relationship that is not I mean, that is not problematic. And I think that could be like an example of the things that are happening right now, not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world. I'm thinking of the context of the US, for example, and and things like that. So I think that can you go back to your definition of special, please?
So I brought here a very
Oh, no, I
simple
mean in the slides, in
definition.
the slides.
The slide. I brought here a very simple definition of special, which is deep cooperation across multiple fields, trust, reciprocity, and preferential treatment, and long-term resilience, even in the face of challenges. And the full definition, I found like four main key points. One is qualitative, so it's the quality of the relationship, thus referring to the fact that there is a deep cooperation. Quantitative, in the sense of um, how many fields, how many organizations are involved. There's the substantive aspect of it, which is that the relationship would be recognized as special by the partners and by outsiders. And the last is the temporal aspect, which is the long-term resilience, meaning that it stayed special quantitatively and quantitatively along the years.
And it, I guess it's projected to remain that way for the future, right?
So that's a good question. There are challenges to this relationship. This relationship, I have to say, was never harmonious. It always had conflicts and always had challenges to it. And it managed to overcome these challenges because of history, because of the significance that Germany attributes to this relationship and to its historical responsibility towards Israel, but also because the fact that there were such strong ties between individuals, organizations, different institutions, and some of the challenges today are, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't say what will happen. But one of the conditions, let's say, for two countries to be engaged in a special relationship is to have the same kind of regime. So they need to be democracies. And there are processes that are happening that might endanger that. But also there is a change of generations, like a major shift of generations and of demographic changes in both countries that might make kind of like drift away from the memory of the past. And this is why I actually emphasize the fact that interaction that happens through cooperation can help with that, because once once German and Israelis, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Jewish Israelis, if we're talking about Germans who had a, a some kind of a family relationship to the Third Reich. It doesn't matter who these people are. Once they are engaged with each other and they have an open discussion and they are um, educated about the Holocaust, they can continue and respect this memory and discuss it and keep it alive through regular interaction and not necessarily just to discuss the past and its implications.
Yes, that's I think that's like really important when we talk about memory. I think that, I mean, totally an outsider, so this is my impression, but I think that such strong memories are very difficult for even for young generations not to acknowledge. I think that both countries are constantly reminding people and their citizens what happened. Of course, I understand that perhaps there might be people that do not agree with this kind of memory, and also here in the States we talk about the deniers. No, there's also deniers of the Holocaust and atrocities that have happened in the past. Does that have something has had some kind of impact in the special relationship?
So it didn't impact the special relationship yet, but there is a public opinion in Germany towards Israel is not the most positive. And I want to say that it became more negative, but actually it was never completely positive. On the contrary, in Israel, public opinion on Germany is only on the rise, like it's getting more and more positive. Um, it didn't affect the special relationship because at the moment, this again, the special ties that I refer to, this extensive cooperation, it happens among the elites, the political elites, the social elites, the scientific, military, and security. It happens among a very certain part of the population, and these people are always engaged with one another. So they have access to knowledge on the vast cooperation, on the benefits that it yields to both sides, and they are also engaged in commemoration rituals that keeps this keeps the special ties alive. Most of the population is not engaged in those things, and this is why I keep emphasizing the fact that if we concentrate on cooperation and on the benefits of interacting between both countries, this is something that can help the special relationship to continue. And just to give an example, like this year, Israel and Germany celebrate 60 years of diplomatic relations. And the first event that the state of Bavaria was organizing to celebrate this is themed shaping the future through economic cooperation. So by emphasizing these aspects of interaction with Israel, they actually give younger people, the younger generation, an opportunity to get to know Israel from a different perspective, a perspective of, okay, economic cooperation. If I work in BMW or Mercedes and they invest in a startup in Israel because they have the best cybersecurity, then maybe I'll go to Israel and I learn something about this. And it creates an interaction that is super positive and that can keep the strong ties between the countries alive 2 years to come.
Okay, I think that's super important. I also know at the beginning that you mentioned that you were going to rely on the scientific part, but I am curious about, like, for example, the academic part. Are there any kind of agreements or cooperations, like, for example, between universities that someone can go and spend like a semester there, or that kind of a thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a really long list. So the cooperation is, I divided it in my research into 5 sections, and one is between the ministries, and there are multiple agreements. So if you go to the website of the German education ministry, you will see that they have titles for different kinds of cooperations that they have, and within these 11 titles, there are a lot of headlines of like cooperation with Asia or cooperation. And there's one title for Israel. It's the only country that receives its own title because the cooperation is so vast that it needs its own website. So there are multiple agreements, and they're also cooperation between universities and research institutions. So the Max Planck Institute continues its relationship with Israeli universities and research institutes. And there is the Minerva Foundation that actually started as a legal liability to transfer money from Germany to Israel and became this amazing, huge organization that supports cooperation between the two countries and have research centers in Israel and they allocate scholarships for Israelis to visit Germany, Germans to visit Israel. You have cooperation between the German lenders specifically, not just on the federal level, with Israeli universities and institutions. All the German political foundations are also dedicated to foster scientific cooperation. They offer exchange scholarships. They facilitate all kinds of projects in Israel. They also facilitated projects with Israel and Arab population, between Jews and Arabs, between the Palestinians. All the German organizations that are relevant for the academic world are engaged in Israel.
Wow. Wow. Noah, while you were doing your research, what can you say is like the most, not surprising, but like the most unexpected, just to say a word, finding that you discovered? I mean, your discovery. What would you say? Oh my God, I didn't know this while doing all your research.
Wow, there were a lot of things. I think that one of the things that struck me the most, at least at the beginning, was to discover that at the beginning, there were a lot of Germans who didn't understand why Israel is so reluctant of cooperation. So now, obviously, it's not even it's not something that can even happen. But in the first 2 decades, there were a lot of Germans who would be like, why don't they want to cooperate with us? And it's a funny example, but I was researching also the Volkswagen, the company, the car company, but also its foundation that was established to support cooperation with Israel. But they wanted to advertise in Israel on the radio. You know, once advertisements were read by the broadcaster on the radio, and they had an advertisement for the car, and the broadcaster that day, she refused to read the commercial. And I found this document from one of their meetings at the headquarters in Germany, and they couldn't understand. They were outraged. They were surprised. How come she doesn't agree to why? And I'm like, it's the car that Hitler invented. Why are you so surprised? I mean, this company had forced labor during the war. It was just the beginning of the 60s. How are you so surprised? But that struck me completely. But also, I think something that surprised me and is that in Israel, it seems that in some places this cooperation is taken a little bit for granted, too much.
Oh.
And I do hope that it's just not something too serious that won't affect too much. But it seems like sometimes people are like, yeah, Germany, it became like a regular thing, but it's quite remarkable.
But what do you mean taken for granted? That they assume it's going to be like there forever and they don't take care of it or something like that?
They don't groom it enough on their side.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I don't say that as a whole, I don't generalize, but sometimes I encountered that and I was very much surprised. But again, it's very easy to see things when you observe them from outside.
Yes, 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 of course. But international relations require grooming, as you say. It has to be taken care of all the time.
Absolutely.
Noah, and what were one of the things that you thought you were going to find and you didn't? Did that happen? Was that the case? Sometimes when you go into a research process, you think you have like certain assumptions, so you think you're gonna find something, and then you realize that, oh no, I was doing it in a completely different way.
Absolutely. I mean, when I started, I was more thinking that the question that will lead me will be how did the historical context shape these relations, made them so special? But the more I went into this, I realized that the relations are so vast, and really they go into, as I said, like the scientific ones are so broad, and also the cultural one, and the relationship between the militaries and the intelligence establishments. And then you understand that there's something more into it. And then I realized, okay, the historical context is not everything in here. There's more to it. And I was actually happy to discover it again, because as I said, I think that this way we can trust that the legacy of the Holocaust will remain prominent in these relations and in the memory of both countries. But I was really surprised to discover how vast this relationship is, and I was surprised to discover that complementarity was something so prominent in the relations. It's almost like the joke that there were all in some of the interviews people were mentioning with companies in Germany, especially. People were mentioning, yeah, the Israelis, you're such a mess and you work without any structure, and we love it. We love it. Like, we need it here because here everything is so organized, and then you bring your mess and we find like amazing things together. And then all the stereotypes about Israelis and Germans became actually, well, true, but also something that has a positive impact, which was also nice to discover.
Noah, how many people did you interviewed?
All in all, 27.
Wow. And they were Germans and Israelis both?
Germans and Israelis, mostly Germans, because in my PhD I was focusing more on the German motives to continue and have special ties with Israel, because I quite assumed at the beginning that it will be very clear to explain why would Israel be so willing and motivated to be in special ties with Germany, considering the fact that Israel is always in a need of support, if it's political support, if it's financial support, and it's much easier to explain it from the Israeli side. And I was more curious about the German side, especially because the changes that have been through with reunification and with Germany becoming an economic power. So I was concentrating more on the German side.
And which companies or which where you're like interview?
So for my own research, I interviewed mostly people from the research organizations, but for research that I did for the German Israeli Chamber of Commerce, we interviewed people working for BMW, for Volkswagen, for Siemens and Bosch, and there was another long list of interviews that we were conducting to learn more about innovation complementarities between Germany and Israel.
And you didn't find any kind of reluctance of the interviewees. They were willing to answer all your questions with no problem?
I have to say that yes, and I did expect to have some reluctance, but I have to say that all the interviews were very smooth in the sense that people were openly, like very open to discuss these topics, and very willing to cooperate. It was a very good experience.
That's very interesting because I would have assumed that perhaps some kind of resistance there. So Noah, tell me, after this research, what comes? Are you going to keep doing the same research? Is it going to be published?
So the aim is to publish it as a book. And the other aim is to continue research different aspects of it. And hopefully in my postdoc, one of the directions that I would like to further delve into is the public opinion that I mentioned, and the fact that how public opinion in Germany, why is it so different from the elite opinions, and how it can influence the special ties.
Yes, I think since I'm a historian, I'm sorry to insist on this. I keep coming back to your statement that history is not enough, which I understand what you're saying, and after listening to you, it makes sense, but it's like making me think because as a public historian, the past, and you mentioned this already, the past is in the present. We bring the
Always.
to the present all the time. And you mentioned examples about that, about with the historical commemorations and the historical memory. So I would argue that in a sense, I mean, history perhaps is not enough, but it's very present. I mean,
Absolutely.
you cannot do it without a historical knowledge. And practices of public history. So I think that's a very good like thing for us as public historians to think about, and like a good question also to pose for students. I don't know. You are an international, you have an international degree, but are you a historian too?
I would say that my heart is an historian, first of all.
Okay.
My BA is in international relations, but the MA and PhD I did at the European Forum, which is an interdisciplinary department. So
Okay.
I had the very wonderful pleasure of privilege even to be able to go in both directions.
Okay. Yeah. And when you talk about public opinion, that's informed a lot by history. And with the people you interview, would you say that they were historically aware, that they would like have a historical conscience, like very
Most of them, absolutely. Most of them had a, it was also very interesting to see how we can discuss now why, for example, the Volkswagen Foundation, that is it's separated from the company. It's a foundation that was established to utilize when Volkswagen the company was sold. It became privatized. There were funds that were transferred to the foundation, and it was dedicated to research. And I discussed with the director, and you know, on the scientific excellence of the outputs that the scientific cooperation yields, and at the same time he made sure to remind me all the time, but also the it's important to cooperate with Israel. It's still always there, and it was always brought up, even if the emphasis was on the successful outputs of cooperation. The historic context was always also sitting with us in the room.
okay. That's very important because in other parts of the world, I'm thinking about Latin America. Sometimes people don't have that strong historical conscience. So
But again, that's exactly the point that I said earlier, that it's something that is reserved for the elites, because the director of Volkswagen Stiftung, that this foundation, from the power from because this is what he does, he also visits Israel and he meets with Israeli counterparts and colleagues. And when he comes with a delegation, it's part of their protocol to go to Yad Vashem. So besides the fact that he's from a generation that still remembers it, the people that are involved in the relationship to that extent are always also engaged with Israel, with the historical context. They are engaged with it because of what they do. And sometimes they do what they do because they have the historical awareness, but it always includes like a certain amount of knowledge.
yes, yes. Do you think that in the science world that knowledge is like imparted to the people? Like if you go and are part of these organizations, there's some kind of instruction, I don't know, some kind of sense that you need to have like a historical conscience or no? Am I making sense or not
I'm
really?
not sure what you mean, but in general, I believe that education is one of the most important things for us as a society and for the development of the society into a more positive direction. I think that once you are educated and have the tools to have critical thinking and open thinking, then everything, everything can be better,
What I
to
am
put it
thinking is,
simply.
for example, I teach business majors mainly, but I'm a historian. And I always have the question, we don't need history. We don't need history. Why do we need to know history? We don't know that has nothing to do with us. But it actually does. I mean, it does all the time. So have you like encountered those kinds of questions? Like why do we need to know this or not really?
Yeah, I mean, when I started writing my research proposal for the postdoc and talking about public opinion, especially in Germany, then you see it also in surveys. There's always this question about the past, if it should still be present, the past. And a lot of people say no. And there are a lot of people that really emphasize this need to put the past behind, that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't agree with it. I think history always matters, and I think that we can learn from history, how not to make the same mistakes or how to do things better. But also, it's a cliche, but if we don't know where we came from, how do we know where we're going?
Yes, and also in here in the slide where you are talking about what do you mean about special? You're talking about long-term resilience, even in the face of challenges. That's also like historical references all all the time there. So yes, I agree with you. Noah, is there something you would like to say, like to close, like a concluding remark, something you would like to emphasize that you didn't say before?
I think we covered most of the things, and I would like to end with a with an optimistic note that I do hope that cooperation will be beneficial for both sides. Eh, that Israel will also learn more lessons from the past.
I would like to also to complement that not only talking about Israel and Germany, but for the whole world. We all know that there's a lot of things going on right now, and I think cooperation and understanding things like you have presented here could be like a good alternative instead of resorting to such violent and solutions and banning certain things that at the end just hurt us. So thank you. No, I just have to thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation, for accepting our invitation. I hope it's not the last time. I hope when you publish the book, you will let us know. We could do a launching here at Explorers, and yeah, I hope this is the beginning of a collaboration, of a academic collaboration, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I would be happy to continue the collaboration. Thank you, Jimena.